Hey there, Film Buds. Welcome back to the Film Buds podcast. I'm your host, Paul.
And I'm Lauren.
And we are continuing Black History Month.
Woo woo! Best month of the year, guys. You know,
Happy February, motherfucker.
When you don't think about the slavery. Best month of the year when you don't think about slavery.
Well, you know, it's Black History, and I think, I think some people, have also referred to it as Black History and Black Excellence.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Black Excellence.
So do you have to honor the lineage? Sure. But also celebrate where it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that too often, honestly, when we get to February, when I go back in my memory,
King Jr.
Yeah,
slavery.
We talk in school in February all the time about the slaves, Martin Luther King, and gosh darn it, that might just be all of it. Because Harriet Tubman is right there in with the slaves, and so is Sojourner. Oh, good. But I feel like that's lumped in
with
right
Martin
there.
Luther.
Yeah, exactly.
It's civil rights, the umbrella of the civil rights movement, and the umbrella of slavery.
Exactly, and those are the only things that we really, truly focus on.
And George Washington Carver and the peanut.
Well, again, my brain lumps that right on in there with Frederick
It's the
Douglass.
Antebellum era kind of thing.
It's these times between. It's it's almost like Black history is cemented by these two moments in history, and those are like the beginning point and the end point. We've got all of this stuff in the middle, but really like Black history as a textbook thing ends pretty much with Martin Luther King until we get to Obama.
Well, and I was just about to say, I think both parts of the discussion ignore some of the immediate aftermath, right?
Well, yeah.
Culturally speaking, and how, emancipation had upsides and downsides, right? Because it's like freedom, but sharecropping. Kind of a thing.
Well, that also gets into the whole, whitewashed version of history that we get told. We get the bullet points where things were really good. We get the Emancipation Proclamation. Yay, we freed the slaves. We don't
get Reconstruction.
Exactly. We get Martin Luther King leading people peacefully.
We don't get J. Edgar murdering him.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the thing that really...
Or really any of the COINTELPRO stuff that was psyop warfare against black leaders of power.
Yeah,
Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton.
It is not just Martin. It is not, but he is the peaceful one. Whereas Malcolm
Fred
X...
and Malcolm were both more militant.
Yeah.
Because they were firmly in... Malcolm X was definitely firmly militant. Fred Hampton based the Rainbow Coalition out of the Black Panther movement.
Yes.
So they were both much more militant.
Where we get
Reverend Martin Luther King.
Reverend, exactly.
They love to slap the Reverend on it.
Because he's a godly man. He's Christian.
Yep.
Whereas these other heathens,
one's a Muslim, for God's sake.
Whoa, we can't have that here. Islam, who?
Exactly.
No. And I think that I really think that this is it's really hard to look at Black History Month and not focus on the things that we always focus on, because those are the things that have been forced down our throats for years.
They're the most obvious place to go.
Exactly. But this has been fun with you on Film Buds this month, going and doing some things that are completely out of the blue, that are also a part of Black history. Because Black history is not just slavery and then equality, is what we're calling...
Let's call it desegregation.
Desegregation sounds great.
Equality is not necessarily right. Let's call it desegregation.
Because we're not equal. We are not equal in that, not even by half.
There's no equality, there's no equanimity.
No.
Let's call it desegregation as the victory.
Yes. People aren't actively racist on purpose anymore. It's passive, and some people are totally still doing it on purpose. That is a very fair point. But for the most part, people are pretending like racism doesn't exist, and therefore the races are equal, and that's where Black people kind of live right now.
Well, and they love to go back to it's civil rights until Obama. The card that everyone loves to pull out is, if America is racist, then why did we elect Obama?
Well, yeah, of
you
course.
Know, as like the perfect sort of lead shield, to this radiation.
I love that racist people are using that as a thing, like they asked for this to happen.
Like they're the ones that also voted for him.
No, yeah, but they're just using this as like a slight win for racism. Like, oh!
How can America be a racist nation? We elected a Black president.
Like, do you hear yourself speak?
No.
But this is the history that we're ignoring also.
Yeah.
Because of the buffers, of the beginning of the conversation.
No, and to go back to your point of this month in Black history, last month was very historic, in its focus, or last year.
Yes,
was
last
very
big Black History Month.
Historic in its scope, and I think that with Black History Month this month, I wanted to do things that felt interesting, and did, going back to what you said, cover that full spectrum. So the Woman Queen, I always mistake it with the actual, or the Woman King. Mm-hmm. I always mistake it with the movie, The African Queen. I always do this weird, like, mental mix-up because of the titles.
Well, it's because we don't have more of them.
And so, but they couldn't be more different, The African Queen is Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn.
It's about white people, you say.
Yeah, like escaping Nazis. And so...
Fantastic.
Different as daylight and dark. So, but I wanted to do this sort of interesting thing, this modern movie that, like, we also had a mixed opinion on. Successful and not as a movie, and I thought that was an interesting path to go down. But also, it was an exciting movie, and it was an interesting movie, and it was a big movie.
And it was a new movie.
Yeah. And that was one of the reasons, those are the many reasons, that I chose that one to start out the month with. And now we find ourselves here with an interesting choice, Blacula.
I loved when you pitched this. Honestly, swear to God, couldn't have slam dunked the funk better for me in this category. Something completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
No one else on any podcast that you could listen to right here and now is talking about Blacula during Black History Month.
Yeah, as like a let's celebrate Black people,
No, yeah, because it's wrapped up in Blaxploitation, but I think that Blaxploitation is
I think in a modern context, a much misunderstood term.
Okay, I will accept that, and we'll dig in further later.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you want, we can, I guess, scratch it a little bit now. I think that Blaxploitation, people assume means Black people being exploited. I think that's what the name on the surface level sounds like.
Well, yeah, because it's
Blaxploitation.
That's what it is.
But exploitation films is where the term comes from. Mm-hmm. And exploitation films, right, in the 70s, let's look at what happens in the late 60s moving into the 70s. So we've had the civil rights movement. We've had women's liberation and women's rights, second wave feminism and some of that sort of thing.
We've had the Black Revolution,
exactly,
happening in the 70s as well.
We've even had, Asian and Hispanic, movements tied up in some of the civil rights movements as well. A lot of reclamation of identities.
Yes, for sure.
Queer identities are on the rise, right? Harvey Milk,
yes,
sort of thing. And so we're also now dealing with a American mediascape out of the shadow of the Hays Code, out of the shadow of McCarthyism, and the 60s definitely pushed boundaries, but not in the same way that the 70s did. And once you move into the 70s, you start to get exploitation films, grindhouse pictures, right? These dirty, nasty, sexy, violent, everything that the Hays Code banned put into a movie.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the what is it? The thesis statement of the 70s is, the exact opposite of the Hays Code in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah. MASH.
In a way that the 60s couldn't do yet.
Yeah, and you look at the filmmakers, some people refer to them as the film school brats. You look at Spielberg and Coppola and Scorsese and De Palma and Lucas and all of these people that started to take and expand the medium into new and different ways. The 70s is the birth of the anti-Western and the spaghetti Western, right? It's this exploration that pushes everything into the fringe categories of the big primary colors of early film. And so exploitation films were a part of that. These fringe, sort of noir films, but with all the sex and violence poured back in movies. And that's where Blaxploitation lives. It was because also the civil rights movement and all of that increased access, increased availability, and it allowed filmmakers to come in, not to the same degree as we would like, but it allowed an opportunity for filmmakers to come in and go, let's go and tell these stories. Let's feed into the zeitgeist of these crime narratives and these pulp stories on screen, but with all black casts, which, also fit in with sort of the zeitgeist of the time. You were about to say something.
Yes, sorry. No, you were talking about Blaxploitation. One, completely misunderstood medium.
Yeah.
But also, oh gosh, hold on.
I was talking about exploitation films and how the civil rights movement led to an increase in representation and access to a degree.
Yes, and so with that increased, access to the medium, we're getting more black people on film, number one. But now we get to have fun because we're not just getting one character on a screen and that's it in the entire film.
Whole cast.
Whole cast. We're getting to also in this time period really rejoice in what it is. We're kind of taking these stereotypes that they've put us down with for so many generations and using them as almost like a front-facing joke. Leaning into them more so. We've got the Rudy Ray Moore movies.
Dolomite, and all of that.
Yes, that are leaning into the
Shaft.
To the black isms that are out there that people are making fun of on a regular basis and using those as weapons. It's the whole movement of the time, though. It's this time of reclaiming what it means to be black.
It's a Black Power Afro pick.
Exactly.
As a movie.
Exactly, and that's why it is so extreme, and that's why all of these characters are so heightened, because they are also heightened in what it means to be black at the time. And so they're really leaning into this 70s...
Big, colorful, pimp suits.
Yes.
You're a bad mother. Shut your mouth.
Exactly. Instead of it being this thing that is used as an insult, we're using it now as a symbol of pride. And I think that that's where Blaxploitation is
Cool on display.
Yes. And I think that that's where this medium and this genre of film gets so bogged down with the fact that it is about, black people doing black shit, but in reality, in that moment, it was reclaiming all of those isms.
Well, and let's really put it on display. Blaxploitation becomes so popular that entire Bond movie co-ops that language into a main part of its plot. Live and Let Die. Roger Moore's Live and Let Die. Kananga. Bond comes to New York. He has to go to Harlem, or something like that.
Yes.
To this black club where there's the big black guy with the gold tooth and the hook hand, and he gets taken to Mr. Big, behind the club.
Yes.
And all of this sort of thing. And then eventually it still gets tied again. It's getting wrapped up in this entire sort of civil rights movement, this black culture on display thing, because who is Mr. Big, this black American gangster criminal figure exploiting? Central America black, where we go back and we do the Caribbean thing with Odd Job and Voodoo and all of this sort of thing. And so all of this stuff was of popular enough variety that a Bond film said, we're going to tap into it.
Well, yeah, because it was the cool of the time. Because what's more cool than looking at an entire group of people redefining what it is to be them and proud of it, and it's envious.
Yeah.
You want that. You want that for yourself, because how dare you, at a certain extent, allow yourself to take our insults and make something cool out of it, make something interesting, make something that I'm now jealous of out of it.
Yeah.
We're taking all of the juckin' and jiving that was in those old movies that you put blackface on for, all of the yeses and the nosas, that you put into these old films, and we're now using them. And
putting all the cultural context back into it.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. Fantastic medium.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly really, really happy with our recent additions to the collection.
Yeah, we did decide to expand, much like if you haven't caught our the problem with Apu episode, or if you haven't seen the documentary, Whoopi Goldberg has a collection of essentially entirely racist dolls, figures, etc. And she refers to it as her Negrobilia collection. And so my dear wife has decided to do the same thing, but encased inside of our film collection. And
yes!
So if there is an interesting opportunity for something, that catches her eye in this sort of regard, we add it.
And it has been a lot of these Blaxploitation films, because they're fascinating. Honestly, after watching the film of the day, Blacula, I think that I'm even more excited to watch the other ones that you've added.
Yeah. So to William Crane, who directed Blacula, also directed another Blaxploitation horror film, which is like another subset inside the genre. Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde.
Okay.
And that's the other one that William Crane, who did Blacula, directed. But then we also, of course, have Scream Blacula Scream, the sequel to Blacula, starring Pam Grier. And I also got us Blackenstein.
Yes, fantastic. It's the best of both worlds, really, for me. Honestly, it's a bunch of...
It's horror. It's Blaxploitation.
It's truly the best. I love a good picked afro and some dynamites thrown in.
It really feels like, and we can elaborate this a little bit further as we go, this definitely feels like the roots of Tales from the Hood.
Yes. Interesting.
And so I guess without any further ado, we should really jump into this show.
Yes, we have been just chatting away here. Let's talk about this film.
So Blacula came out in 1972, which is essentially still 60s filmmaking, you know.
Yeah, we're pretty early in the 70s.
It is directed by William Crane. It is written by Joan Torres and Raymond Koenig. It stars William Marshall as Blacula, Vonetta McGee as Tina, Denise Nicholas as Michelle, and Thalmus Razulal.
I think it might be...
Razulala?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
As Dr. Gordon Thomas. And the premise is an ancient African prince turned into a vampire by Dracula himself finds himself in modern Los Angeles.
Wow, that is such a boring sentence.
It is rated PG, and it runs 1 hour and 33 minutes. Dear, would you like to start, or would you like me to start? How would you like to kick this off?
Oh gosh. You know what? Let's switch it up. Since it's Black History Month, I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. All right. So, Blacula is one of those titles that almost, for me, for many years, was thrown around as like a joke. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Makes perfect sense.
It's this, and then there's Blacula, you know? If a sequel came out that felt like an obvious, or a rip-off movie came out that felt like an obvious rip-off movie, Blacula was kind of like this shorthand.
Okay.
For that kind of, like, cheap knockoff thing. So going into it, you know, I've seen umpteen million Dracula stories, Nosferatu, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Dracula NBC show. I've seen countless Dracula vampire narratives. So going into it, I was like, I really don't know what to expect of Blacula. You know, people talk about it being this, like, cheap sort of movie. It's a blaxploitation horror film. Really didn't know what I was going to get. The last thing I expected was that it was essentially just Black Dracula. Like, like it's honestly so strangely, surprisingly earnest in the fact that it's just kind of a fucking vampire Dracula story.
Totally.
That it almost caught me off guard. And are there some ways that it shortcuts and shortchanges some stuff narratively? Yeah, sure, but fuck it, whatever. It's an hour and a half Dracula story.
Where they just call it Blacula the whole time.
And I was pretty astounded by that. And I think that's where I'll start my review and pitch it to you.
Oh my gosh. No, same. Oh my gosh, absolutely same. I went into this movie having no idea what we were getting into whatsoever. I honestly...
I really picked the shit out of this. Like, just, weep.
Yeah, it sounded fantastic. I was like, any movie called Blacula has my attention 100%.
It's like Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought this was going to be. That's actually what I was going to say. That's so funny. I really thought that this movie was going to be just as bad.
It's going to be stupid.
It's going to be the worst movie I've ever seen. It is going to be black people just shucking and jiving. And it's going to be that. And I'm going to...
It's going to be the airplane scene where... Joan Cleaver walks up and goes, "Excuse me, hostess, I speak jive,"
yes!
for an entire movie.
Yes! No, and I really walked into this going, I may hate this film as a black person, but I have to.
But it's going to be interesting
but it's-
when I get to the other end.
Exactly, because, at the end of the day, whether I like it or not, this is going to be an interesting window into black history.
And people know, even if it's just by name alone, Blacula.
Exactly. It's got this reputation behind it. And I walked into this film expecting it to be garbage and walked away genuinely surprised at how much I truly liked it.
Satisfying Dracula story for 90 minutes.
Oh yeah, and honestly, it was perfect from every part of it because the casting is phenomenal in this film. I have to say, his
Blackula himself.
Blackula himself has the absolute perfect.
He's got the vibe.
He's got the voice.
He's got the vibe.
He's got that James Earl Jones.
He's tall. He's imposing.
So good.
He's powerful.
And it just oozes off of the screen,
he pulls off the cape.
There's really nothing sexy about this man, truly.
Not at all.
But his voice kills me.
Mm-hmm. It's like Morgan Freeman.
It is like Morgan.
Technically, on paper, if I just did Morgan Freeman and you didn't hear him speak, you knew nothing about him.
Nothing sexy about Morgan Freeman.
But then he gets going, and you're like, "Oh, charisma."
But the same happens with James.
Excuse me for the young listeners. The Riz.
Oh God, they're not listening to us.
That's right.
Old.
That's right. We're 30.
That's right. Yeah, we are. Woo! No, and honestly, this man's voice is freaking velvet. He is fantastic.
Excuse me, madam. You dropped your purse.
This movie, but I think that for me, honestly, this movie could have been longer.
I would have watched, if we really did the full, to your point, I think one of the weaknesses of this movie is that it is only an hour and a half, because actually the bullet points of the Dracula story are almost a little boring.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Dracula story, right? Have you seen Coppola's yet? Have we watched that yet with Keanu Reeves?
No, we have not watched Coppola's Dracula together.
Even though it's a little cornball at times, or a little melodramatic,
mm-hmm.
almost in a Sam Raimi-ish fashion at times.
Mm.
Even though it treads that line, he gets into the weeds in the Dracula myth. The Dracula turning into a sort of wolf creature. The thrall and of others.
Mm-hmm.
He really, the Jonathan Harker figure.
Mm-hmm.
He really commits to all of the bits. And speaking about this movie, as you were talking about it being longer, I like this movie a lot, but there are so many ways in which it just chops out, little bits of the Dracula mythos that ultimately do make the story feel a little bit cheaper.
I feel like this movie jumps chapters in minutes. Scene change will happen, and then out of nowhere, they were in love. And there was nothing really explained about it other than they were, the people from the past life.
Listen, here's my thing. If you are going to show a character talking to another character off screen, and an entire 180 is supposed to happen emotionally, either the entire chemistry of that scene, even from afar, needs to play out as earning that,
mm-hmm.
or I need to find out, the one line he said that changed her mind.
Yeah, no, honestly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Even if she says it to her friend, what did he say? And she goes, I don't remember much, and we could even, play it. It's the haze of the Dracula spell.
Yeah, because the lore of Dracula is that he can,
read your thoughts and read your desire.
And he can basically hypnotize you.
Yes.
With desire, and so like that, I was like, okay, we're just gonna yada yada around this point.
And that's also one of the reason that it's such a cheap sell is that it's a big crux point in the original Dracula story, and we're doing such a close to the vest on a certain level Dracula plotting with the Dr. Van Helsing and the bodies disappearing and all of these sorts of things, and we're playing it to a degree close enough to the chest that her willingness is important.
It was a complete 180 in this film.
And it's not earned.
It's complete 180 because the very scene beforehand is her locking her doors and coming at the door with a knife when her best friend knocks on the door because she thinks that somebody is here to murder her. And then the very next scene after that, we don't even get a buffer scene. We just get, and then the next day happens. And she is like, do you want to sit at our table? At my sister's birthday.
After he says something that we don't get to hear. They have an entire off-mic interaction.
Yeah.
And then she invites him over.
No, for sure. And I think that for me, I could have had a longer film if only to flesh out.
You have to sell that she wants this.
And it doesn't just feel like a complete character shift.
But she does the same thing, spoiler alert, in the scene where she chooses to still have sex with him. Even though he was like, we're supposed to be together forever. And she was like, this is all too heavy for me. And he was like, well, then I'll go. And then she was like, no, let's still have sex, though.
I think that was her being like, I've made my decision. I want you to stay.
And perhaps, but it still, again, it feels unearned. It feels very quick.
And I felt like a lot of the relationship between them ran so quickly. Honestly, at the end of the day, I felt like she was not as interesting. I felt like our Blacula was it. They framed this entire movie around this man.
Our Blacula and our...
And our Van Helsing?
Our new Van Helsing, Dr. Gordon Thomas.
He was amazing.
And
honestly, every other person other than his love interest really had my attention. Michelle was great.
I liked Michelle a lot.
Because Michelle and Dr. Gordon Thomas had fantastic chemistry.
I believed that they were a couple. I believed that she was here with him.
Yeah.
And I think my other issue with this is that, like, there's this sort of pimp-ish figure that's introduced at the nightclub that sort of comes in and out. That's interested in the photographer.
Yes. I wish I could remember his name.
One of my issues is that, like, he feels like he should have been one of the merry band of paramours of this one person from the Dracula lore that becomes an assistant to Van Helsing in the pursuit of killing Dracula. Okay. Along the way, in the Dracula lore, in the original story, certain characters come along the way that were paramours of someone that gets turned by Dracula.
Okay.
And I feel like this guy would have been one of those people that should have been along for the ride with Dr. Van Helsing. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, again, the shortchanging of the time span. Because our Van Helsing is great, and his relationship to his wife is wonderful.
Top 10.
Very relatable, very human. The scene where they dig up the corpse together, and she's, horrified by the reveal of a vampire.
Oh my gosh, she literally looks at him and is like, why didn't you tell me? And then very earnestly afterwards just goes, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, you knew this lightning rod hit her and was like, you know what? I'm not going to blame you for not telling me, because even if you had...
I'd have never come out here with you in the first place.
I would have never believed you.
I'd let you
Absolutely
come
not.
out here and dig this shit up yourself.
Because you're crazy. No, honestly, oh gosh, she was so pretty too. She was stunning.
Let's also talk about that. Honestly, everyone looked good.
Yeah, everybody was great in this
The
film.
costuming was good. Their hair and makeup were on point. Everyone looked the best that they could look. Does that make sense?
Yes. And honestly, for me, this really
They didn't have Adonis bods, but they were all hot.
No, and like the 70s isn't about being an Adonis.
Hell no.
It's about having charisma. You can be ugly as a post in the 70s and still be sexy. It's all about how you wiggle. But no, I think that honestly, this film, especially their relationship, more so than our main relationship that we're supposed to fall for, the Dracula relationship. I think that for me, Dr. Gordon Thomas and Michelle were a real, and in a way,
derivations, from the story that also pays off the best.
They were real in a way that was honest and true. It is something that like you can't capture in film, you can't capture in acting, because it's almost so real that they must have just been in a relationship together.
For the best, I think, modern example that I can call on, Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya
As
in Nope
siblings.
as siblings.
Yes.
When they do that handshake, that is an iconic moment of feeling, two people feeling.
Exactly. And now we're mixing that up with the Black identity as well, which is something that is so commercialized at our point in history. But back then, it was this unutilized talent, this thing that people were putting onto the back burner, to showcase more white talent. Whereas like this movie, this simple movie that people rag on because they have never seen.
Yeah, it's just a title.
Exactly. Has true acting, has true talent right here on display, and it is so simple. And it is thrown away for this film where everybody is giving their absolute all for Blacula, the Blaxploitation film of 1972.
Well, and I think that's why you get, like, in Scream, Blacula, Scream, we're able to go all the way up to Pam Grier.
Yes, because the foundation is already here, and I think that this was not something that I was expecting. And I'm truly so proud of this film.
I'd honestly almost show this to your parents.
I think that they would really enjoy it because it's. I think that people think that this movie is supposed to be garbage. Just by name alone. Sure, there are moments where I was like,
it's a cheap movie.
It is, and you're doing this purely like Blacula. The name of this is truly hysterical. When Dracula looks at this man and it goes, "You shall have my name, but be Blacula." It actively made me cackle.
He plays it so straight.
Yeah, and the whole movie is played so straight. It's like watching a horror movie play out in front of you and know for a fact that these characters aren't stupid and aren't falling into this trap on purpose, but are still prey to it.
Yeah, it's never. It is a cheap movie because of budget and time constraints. And even though there are some shortcomings, it is never an emotionally cheap movie.
No. Honestly, I found this movie very enriching, and I really was obsessed when you went down this rabbit hole of buying more films like this. I was like, I've got to have more, because if there are truly gems, movie gold hidden in these movies that people throw away, that people put up as smut or something.
Deadly Blessing.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
Most people don't watch that movie.
No. And
I don't like that movie just because my professor wrote it.
that you're not in his class anymore. You don't have to say anything.
It's a good movie.
Exactly.
Like, it's interesting. He's really toying with concepts, that are engaging and gripping and relevant.
Yeah. And I think that this is also and
same concept, yeah.
Yeah. And like,
because also what's at the core? What's at the core of the transition of Blacula? So, the Dracula story at its core, right, is about repression, is about desire, it's about the curse of lust. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about Blacula is that he is cursed by a white man's lust. Mm-hmm. Blacula was not, when he was a man, interested in any sort of carnal desire. He was a happily married king. Mm-hmm. He was royalty. And a white man, Dracula, chose to lust for his wife and wished to consume, as Dracula's want to do, and thought that this savage race would be fine with this. And Blacula literally just tries to be like, we've had enough and we're leaving.
Yes, as good dignified black people do.
And then he gets mobbed. And then he gets cursed. And I think that it's really interesting that, the Dracula story is based in this desire for consumption. And I think it's interesting that the curse that is put upon him comes from this white man's lust.
But the thing is he has complete control. Is the funny thing. Whereas, Dracula is lusting for all things.
It doesn't feel like Dracula has the same control. That's a fair point.
Whereas Blacula has a lot. He has complete and utter control when it comes to what he wants. Anything else, he doesn't care. You bother him, he's going to eat you. He doesn't really give a fuck. But when it comes to this woman who is this reincarnation of his wife, he is with the utmost care. And the gentleman among gentlemen, with her. There is no...
Well, and that's also, I guess, the classic Dracula thing. Dracula with Nina in the story is the gentleman. You know what? It's almost a little bit Salem's Lot. How does our main vampire appear to the junkyard gimp? As a kind, gentle spirit. This shoulder to cry on, as you were, But it's very interesting. And I think it plays out in a very interesting way.
No, yeah.
Especially because also his first victims, and the reason that the vampire myth can get swept under the rug, and this is also very interesting for a blaxploitation movie of the early 70s, or any movie of the early 70s, the reason that Dracula can get swept under the rug is, in an American context in the 70s, the population that is considered the most vulnerable that you can prey on the easiest is the queer community. Blacula's first victims are gay.
Yes.
And people like to just use that to brush things away.
No, I'm really glad that you brought this up. I was like, this is a very important part
It's one of the most interesting parts of the movie.
No, yeah, it's... and it's not the best aged part of the film.
No, fair warning for all those who have heard this review and intend to watch the movie. You are going to hear the F slur a lot.
Yes, and we are not talking fuck.
No. I would just say fuck. Or the F word. You're going to hear the F slur. a lot.
Yes. And very openly and very casually. But you also have to understand that it is in the context of this being the 70s. And in the 70s, this was just a word.
And to a degree, this is also painfully accurate. It's almost not dissimilar from, Django Unchained or Hateful Eight.
No, yeah.
Throwing around the N-word. Like, you're going to hear some uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah, because it's a film made in the 70s about present time. Mm-hmm. It's made in the 70s about the 70s. It's not us looking back on the 70s fondly.
Yeah. No, there's none of the veneer. Like, they're using it.
They're using it as a replacement for just saying, homosexuals.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Okay, yeah.
At a certain point. And it was truly, truly shocking how many times they said it. It was one of the things of the movie that I was actually going to give it a deduction for. It was just how often we had to hear the fucking word. But we also open with them being like this is very openly.
The movie doesn't, even though the movie uses the word,
I do not think that
it doesn't make them a joke as people.
No, because they are very honestly like just the next we go from the Dracula of the before times, where it's the slave trade, and then we go to the future where it's this gay couple buying this old house full of old shit because they are antique dealers and they think that it's funny, and that's just it, and it's just honest and true, and like they're just people.
Again, it's really intelligently using the context of the time. Vampirism as a sort of pseudo-metaphor for AIDS. Where is something going to take a foothold? Where is something going
I guess this
to
would have
hit
been
some of the vulnerable communities?
Places where they get shoved under the rug, because the whole thing with this, and lead it back around, I guess, to the point. The whole thing with the vampirism is, in the whole Van Helsing chase, is the fact that it's in these, underprivileged communities.
The bodies are going missing of these people.
And so like it makes sense for the black bodies,
who
but
got
why
to have the proper funeral?
But why are these white bodies going missing? Oh wait, it's the white body of this queer guy. Then we're not going to pay much attention to him. Because, again, it's this 70s concept where, like, these people are undesirable.
Well, and it's the black, queer body that it's like, we've completely lost it. The white one got all of the proper funeral burial rites instantly.
Yeah, but
because it was still that barrier of whiteness.
Well, yeah, but it was also this instant, like, you don't even get to, like, observe the body. We just bury it away. We buried our shame quickly, though.
Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting that, again, it's blaxploitation, but it's also still hitting on these deeper community groups. It's aware that there are black queers, and I think that that's a really interesting angle.
Well, also, we have to think about the time period that we're in. We're in the 70s, where a lot of things...
Queer liberation is
exactly.
happening.
All of these movements are happening at the same time because people are tired of being controlled by the man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think
they're all bursting forth.
I think that...
And it's coming onto the screen as well.
Exactly, because there are also all of these people born in the 50s. Who are in the peak of their lives.
They're
and realizing
tired of hiding.
Yeah, they don't want to live like their parents have lived or the generations before them have lived, closeted.
Sounds like a drag.
Yeah, closeted and sad and boring. No,
and hating life. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's you were talking about earlier about how the 70s was this movement, this liberation of everything, it was a sexual liberation, as well. It was this freeing
That's
yourself.
when we are getting to, like the Masters and Johnson sex studies as the late 60s into the 70s.
This freedom, this freedom to explore taboo. these unsavory things that we have been told for so long that it is not allowed. We do not talk about these things. Well, now I'm an adult and I can make my own decisions. And so now I can explore these facets of my life that have been before, absolutely a no-go, so exploring my race, exploring my sexuality,
exploring what it is, even on a simple term of just going, what if I'm not the good guy? But I am my own main character.
Pushing this limits of wholesome out of the window. And I think that because there's no decade like the 70s.
It's it is truly one of my all-time favorites. There are, I think, 2 decades for me that are hard favorites. It's the 70s, it's the 90s.
Oh.
Because the 90s, you get the big boom, because of videotape and things like that, of the independent cinema resurgence. Wes Anderson comes out of the 90s. Quentin Tarantino comes out of the 90s. Kevin Smith comes out of the 90s. To a degree, Soderbergh comes out of the 90s. You get a lot of really... Fincher. You get a lot of really incredible filmmakers in the 90s. And so, for me, 70s, 90s, excellent time periods. Honestly, as far as horror is concerned... the teens and so far the 20s
have been mark.
Fucking bomb.com for horror.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. No doubt.
And honestly, they've been particularly excellent for black cinema.
Well, again, it's opening these doors.
Yes.
It's
the continuation of that history. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Which started here.
Yes. Yes. With these full black casts for the first time on screen.
1972 is when this movie came out. Let me look up. Excellent. Jordan Peele was born in 1979. I will bet you dollars to donuts that Jordan Peele, one time in his youth, saw Blacula.
Oh, I fucking bet.
And it's the planting of seeds. Sometimes for trees that you will never see get to grow. But it's opening doors. It is creating a bedrock. It is foundational stuff.
Yes. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think that because of these generations, we have been allowed to live the lives that brought us to this point.
Yeah.
Of realizing, the glory and the bad agedness of things like this. But that's also it's
the complication of history. In one of the write-ups that I do about this, I talk about that black representation has a very complicated history in film. Because the earliest context of black representation in film is blackface.
Yeah, it's not even black people. It's a caricature.
Exactly. And then we finally find ourselves in 50 years' time here.
Yes. And you have to, you have to take the good and the bad with this kind of stuff. And this is kind of the taboo of it now. The thing that I love about stuff like this is the fact that
it's a time capsule.
Yeah, that it is still steeped in the time period that it was made in.
The problem with going back and scrubbing out things that we now consider bad to say or what have you is that you remove a very important context that is informative
as to why we've gotten to here,
and also as to how to grow. And there's so much value. It's almost to a degree the classic adage of you learn more in failure. There's the classic Edison quote, even though Edison's a hack, but what have you. I didn't fail XYZ number of times on how to make a light bulb.
I succeeded once.
Exactly. I just learned all the ways to not do it. And so I think that when you look at the history of film, if you try to scrub it of the things that are nasty, vile, uncomfortable by today's standards, you're shortchanging growth.
But also, to your point, I think that without these lessons, the point where we're at doesn't make any sense.
Yes, exactly.
You have to look at these things and understand that you go, oof, this is bad.
Uncomfortable.
And while watching this film, I went, oh my God, when they just started to throw that word out there like it was candy. I was like, my goodness, guys, take a breath.
Two dudes pass that word back and forth like they're playing badminton. And so they're hitting about every 90 seconds. You know what I mean? Like, they're just popping off with
it's
it.
It's just as casual as asking about the weather.
And what's also interesting is one of our characters, even though he's using the word, is vested in finding these people justice.
Exactly. And that's the context. That's
what's so confusing about it.
Because here, it is not being used all of the time as a slur. It is being used
as a descriptor.
It's a replacement term. Mm-hmm. It is purely used as this is what I call these kinds of people. At this point in time...
At that point in time, it's also some of the same distinction between some people being like, I am black, or some people being like, I am Negro.
Yes.
Where it's this term where it's like, you should probably stop using Negro.
Well, the thing is, back then, black was bad. Mm-hmm. And this was this whole bringing about this being like, no, I am black.
Going back to the Ruben Salazar thing, he used Chicano.
Exactly. It's exactly the same thing.
And people hated him for it.
Mm-hmm. It's rebranding this term.
But like in this movie, we've got some non-queer characters just bandying about a word.
Well, yeah. Because I guess in a context when you don't have, the terms, the LGBTQ plus community, using the proper verbiage. Mm-hmm. This is the proper verbiage back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
also, again, you have to remember that they have not lived as far as we are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's this beautiful time capsule. This moment that we can never recreate and we will never go back to.
It's almost like, honestly, to a degree, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
You want to talk about a movie that cannot be made again today? That one.
Yeah, just pure.
This one.
This movie can never be created again unless...
Exactly like this.
Yeah, unless I'm going to do some homage to it like Eddie Murphy did with Dolomite Is My Name.
Mm-hmm. Or I'm going to do some sort of, legacy reboot-quel kind of thing, where it's the child of Blacula, essentially.
Yeah. Or we just pick back up, but now this is Blacula.
Yeah, it's Jonathan Majors is Blacula.
Exactly. Yeah. And do like they did with Candyman. We're bringing it back.
Yeah, we're just doing it again. Yeah.
Forget about the old thing. It's this thing now. No, for sure. And no, again, capital love this movie. Yeah. Capital love this movie. But it is with the context of all of the good, the bad, and the ugly about this film.
This has been a really, really good discussion. I've really enjoyed this because I think that, especially in modern America, I think that most people can approach conversations about race and the uncomfortable natures of race in a way that feels unapproachable or isolating or too volatile. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is I think that strangely enough, I think Blacula really creates a great level playing field.
It oozes in blackness.
But it also creates empathy, creates sympathy, and his entire curse is put on him by a white person.
Yeah.
It's this entire idea of creating an entire generation of black person afflicted by something that was put upon them by a white person in an approachable way.
And even though he has done this, by a white person, 90% of the victims after him are people, of color. Mm-hmm. He doesn't go then and attack white people.
Well,
it's this interesting almost spreading of this throughout the black community, like Dracula had done throughout the white community, Well,
and I was about to say, is it not interesting that that the curse of Dracula upon a person of color creates this kind of, narrative of urban crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, you have to write about what you know, and this is the using the Dracula story in a modern 70s at this point context it has to talk about urban crime, because that's the
poverty created criminality.
It's
Dracula created Blackula.
It's the same backstory that we get for Candyman. But it's this constant...
Slavery begat this context that created this.
Yes, and it's this entire narrative that is wrapped in the American black identity. We can't have a black person start out not in a place that is familiarly black. Where are those places? Yeah. They're poorer areas.
Yeah.
Because of the way that we district our areas, honestly. We like to keep people in places. But that's another topic for another day. Even though it's Black History Month, we're keeping it light here. Light and breezy.
And so, no, it is interesting, because to a certain degree, at the end of the day, the real bad guy is Dracula. If you really want to kind of boil it down, who's the person that made him like this? Mm-hmm. Dracula made a covenant with the devil. He chose. Mm-hmm. This was a curse put upon. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the really interesting things that's also the underpinning of Blacula that I think makes it also distinctly different than Dracula.
And I think that the name in itself
hurts the film.
Actually, I think that it is almost like this double whammy.
Oh, okay.
There's a prestige about
to Dracula.
Yeah, but now you are not only cursed with this thing because I want you to be, because you told me no. Mm-hmm. But now I'm going to give you this ridiculous moniker that is but a bastardization of my name. Mm. So now nobody's going to fear Blacula. As much as they truly do me. But also, at the end of the day, Blacula isn't out there for vengeance. He's out there for truly for his love.
Yeah.
Because at the moment that he loses her, he sacrifices everything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's truly interesting.
Well, and the backstory of Dracula is warlord. Mm-hmm.
He's not a warlord.
No. He had no concubines. He had a wife.
He had a wife. They were put through torture, and he found her again years later in the 70s. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have that life again, and that's why he made all the decisions he made. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting film.
So if you had to rate Blacula out of 5, what would you give it?
I think that the honest score for Blacula is probably a 3.5 for all of all of the Geislers. And I think that that's where I'm gonna leave it. I think it's 3.5.
I'll give it a 3.5 as well. I think that it is good. It is slow at times. Mm-hmm. But it is a fascinating movie. It is a fascinating time capsule. And here's one of the big things, right? I'm not disappointed. I watched it and I will watch it again.
Yeah, openly and happily.
It is a good, interesting, wonderful movie that I think if you really want to also go back into the history of black horror is a necessity. You have to watch this because I think it is a touchstone.
Because also, like, I can't stress enough, like, this movie is completely serious.
And it's also one of the first big examples of, like, entirely black horror.
Mm-hmm. And it's so good because
it's doing a fucking Dracula story.
And the thing is like, this is something that people have done so many times over. There was a model, a few years back at this point, probably more than a few at this point, that did this entire recreation of famous pictures of models that were originally white because of the fact that she had been turned down by so many modeling industry people because they had already met their quota of black people, but they had 10 times as many white people on pay. Mm-hmm. And so it's this whole thing, and they're like, I'm so happy that like there's this level of talent in this gem of this movie that's in this hidden corner of history, because at least it's here. Because for the most part, you don't ever get stuff like this.
Yeah,
and this genre, this type of film grew into something that is always a part of history. We always have our black films of a generation, of a decade. It just changes hands. But I prefer this to a Tyler Perry film.
That's fair. I don't honestly really have anything after this. Dear, do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
Oh gosh, no, I think we've jabba-jawed enough. Bada bing, bada boom. We're done here.
Be good to each other, you guys.
That's the show.
We'll talk to y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.